Hey coders, how's it going? It's Chris here. Hope you guys are having a great day. Over the past couple of weeks, we've gone through a lot of the features of the Parse platform. But when we're talking about saving data, we've always just been working with the contact class. And that was something that we created to represent a person or a contact. Well, chances are in your own app, you may have more than one class. And furthermore, the data may be related. So for example, if this was an application for a salesperson and they wanted to keep track of their contacts and what sort of communication that they've had with these contacts, I might have another class called a call, for example, to represent a phone call. So a phone call may be associated with one of these contacts. So today I'm going to show you how to create another class. We're going to use phone call and how we're going to relate that data to the contacts class. Back in the Parse documentation or the Parse guide, we're going to be looking at the information under objects, relational data. Let's go into our Xcode project now. And this is just a blank single view application Xcode project with the Parse library integrated. If you missed that video, check out this lesson 2 in the upper right hand corner. It's going to open up in a new window and you can see how you can integrate the Parse library into your own Xcode project. And so the main storyboard is empty and we're looking at the view controller.swift, which we have written import parse up here. So in the view.load, what I'm going to do is create a new phone call object. I'm going to set its properties and then save it. Actually not called properties, it's called the key value pairs. So I'm going to create a brand new phone call object. So let call equals pf object, and with class name, this is going to be a brand new one because in our Parse backend right now we only have the contact class. So when I write phone call here and I try to save it, it's going to actually create a brand new class. So let call equal that. Let's set its properties. So call, let's say duration is 50. And then let's also say that the topic or the point of the conversation was follow up. And finally, let's have a contact key where the value is the contact person. So let's say that I just had a call with Tommy and I want my phone call object to have Tommy set as the contact. Well, first I have to actually get Tommy as a PF object from my Parse backend. So I'm going to just comment this guy out for a second and let's retrieve Tommy. So let query equals PF query, class name is contact, and I'm going to add a constraint where key scroll equal to, so key is going to be object ID. I'm going to search for him directly by the object ID. Okay. And I'm going to say query.get first object. So I'm going to use this one, get first object, and it's going to actually return the PF object to me, and it's going to throw. So if something goes wrong, it's going to throw an error. And say let contact equals query.get first object, and because it throws, I have to wrap it in a do statement. So do this stuff, and you have to use the try keyword in front of the throwing statement. So it's going to try this statement, and if it's successful, that's great, but if not, it's going to throw an error. And underneath this do block, you need a catch block to catch the error. So couldn't get the contact. So there's an error that happened there. Okay, so let contact equals try query.get first object. If everything goes right, Tommy will be stored in this constant right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign contact into the contact key of my call object. Okay, and the last thing to do is save in background. Okay, so let's give this a run now, pressing Command R. It's going to retrieve Tommy. It's going to create a new phone call object, set these key value pairs into it. It's going to set Tommy as the contact, and it's going to save it in the background. So we've got a warning here, a long-running operation is being executed on the main thread. And what it's referring to is this right here, this statement. Normally we would probably want to get this in the background, but I wanted to make sure that I have the contact before I continue here. In a real app, you would probably get Tommy in the background, or you would have Tommy as an object already from some other query. So this is just a warning telling you that if you're executing this like we're doing here, it's going to not respond to the user interface while it retrieves this object. So let's look in the backend right now. I'm going to refresh, and now we have a new phone call class. And here we have one call, right? We have the duration, we have the topic, and we have the contact. So this is the contact column, and you can see here it's a pointer, and it points to this object, which is Tommy. If I click this, it's going to jump to the contact table, and it's going to filter by that object ID, giving me Tommy. Tells me exactly where that links to. So that's pretty cool. Let's go back to here, and I'm going to stop the execution of this. I'm just going to comment this out. That's how easy it is to relate two classes of data or relate two PF objects together. Now I want to show you a query. If we wanted to, let's say, retrieve all of the phone calls where we talked to Tommy, let's take a look at how we would do that. So let's go back to the Parse documentation under queries. Let's look under relational queries. So it says here that if you want to retrieve objects where a field matches a particular PF object, in our case Tommy, you can use the where key equal to, just like for other data types. So it's saying that we can do something like this. Let query equals PF query. Let's call this call query actually. PF query class name, we're looking for phone calls, and call query where key contact equals to, and then we would pass in Tommy as an object. So if we didn't comment this out, if we actually have access to Tommy as a PF object, then we would pass that into here. And then we would run this query, and it would search for, under the phone call class, it would search under the contact field for all objects that equal to Tommy. Another way that the documentation says that we can do it, we can query by object ID. So here's how we would do that. Where key, and then we would pass in our field is contact, right, equal to, and then you create a PF object with this initializer without data, with class name, post, and then you pass in the object ID. So let me show you how that would work. We would do where contact equals to PF object without data with class name. So we're just creating a PF object that has no data. The class name is contact, and the object ID is basically this guy right here, like that. And then we would just run this query. Find objects in background with block. Right, this is the list of objects, and here is the error. And in here, all the phone calls we had with Tommy. So at this point, if we're looking for all of the calls where we talked with Tommy, you might be wondering, how do we have Tommy's object ID, or how do we have Tommy as an actual PF object? Because you need either one of those pieces of data to perform a query like this. Well, if you think about what we're looking for all phone calls where we talked with Tommy. Chances are in your application, to get to a query like this, your first screen of your app would probably be a list of contacts, right? And then you would select Tommy from that list, and then you get to Tommy's contact details, or maybe like profile card or something like that. At that point, you would have Tommy as a PF object, or at least his ID. And then there may be a button on that Tommy profile screen then to search for all of the phone calls which you had with him. So if you think about that sort of app navigation structure, where you're drilling down from contact as the first level and then into calls you've had with that contact, then you would have either the object ID of the contact in question, or an actual reference to the contact as a PF object. Okay, now one thing I want to point out to you guys is if we go back to the phone call class and you look under contact, it's a pointer to a contact object right here. Let's say that we performed a query to retrieve all of the phone call data. So right now we only have one phone call object, right? But what's important to note is that when you pull the phone call objects down with a query, it's not going to automatically pull the data for the contact as well. Let me show you what I mean in Xcode here. So let me comment this out again. Let me actually add a couple of comments here to show you what we're doing here. A query to retrieve all phone calls with Tommy. Okay, and up here we were creating and saving a phone call with Tommy. And lastly here we are retrieving all phone calls. So let all calls query equals pf query, and we're going to do phone call, and we're not going to put any constraints on it. We're just going to find objects in background with block. So this is an array of pf objects, which may be nil, and this is an error. So in here we're going to check if let calls equal objects. So if it's not nil, then we're going to say, let's just grab the first one. We know there's at least one call, so we're going to say let first call equals calls 0. Okay, so that's our first phone call, and this is a pf object. Now we know with our phone call object, we have a contact key value pair, right? So let's say let contact equals first call contact, right? We're accessing the contact field of our phone call, and we're putting it into this constant, thinking that we have a pf object that is populated with this guy right here, this contact's info. The thing is, in order to save bandwidth and be more efficient, when you find objects in background, you're looking for phone calls, it's not going to retrieve the data of other classes, even though this phone call has a relationship with the contact class. So meaning that when you pull down this phone call data, it's not going to go and also fetch the contact data that it's pointing to here from this field. If we look in the documentation for a quick moment, and we go back up to objects, relational data, by default, when fetching an object, related pf objects are not fetched. These objects' values cannot be retrieved until they have been fetched like so. Mainly this, fetch if needed in background with block. So let me show you what that means. If we go here, so contact is not populated, but we can do something like fetch in background, fetch if needed in background with block. So just to sum it up, when you retrieve a phone call object, it's not going to retrieve the contact as well. You're going to have to separately go fetch the contact if needed, like this. However, there's an exception to this. If you want to fetch the contact with the phone call, you can modify your query a little bit. All you would need to do is in your all calls query, you can type include key, and we would put the contact here. And if you do this, it's telling Parse that fetch all the phone calls, but also fetch the related contact object as well. And in that case, when you get all of the phone call objects back here, this contact field is going to be populated already with the contact object. So you don't need to fetch it separately like this. But that's only if you know that you need the contact pf object, because otherwise you would be fetching it for no reason. The query would take longer, it would take more bandwidth, and generally just be less efficient. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Please thumbs up the video if you liked it. Please share it with anyone who you think could use it. And please subscribe if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye for now.